Clear your desk by the end of the day, Holly. Human Resources will handle the exit paperwork. I blinked at the screen, rereading the email even though I'd already memorized every word. 5 years. That's how long I'd given to Summit Edge Logistics. 5 years of long nights, tight deadlines, and building one of the most successful teams in the company. And now, a cold corporate email. No meeting, no phone call, just an abrupt end to everything I had poured myself into. 3 days. That's all I'd taken off to bury my father. 3 days of approved bereavement leave. Yet here I was, being told I didn't prioritize my work. Like saying goodbye to my dad was a frivolous vacation. I scanned the rest of the message. We need employees who can demonstrate commitment during critical operational periods. So apparently, my dad's funeral conflicted with one of those undefined, sacred operational periods. And that was enough for them to let me go. The office was quiet. It was early. Too early for most people to be in yet. The Boise skyline outside my window was just starting to brighten with the first blush of dawn. I'd come in early to catch up, thinking I'd ease back into the workflow. My name's Holly Peterson, and up until about 2 minutes ago, I was the regional team lead for the highest performing division at Summit Edge Logistics. At 34, I'd built something real here. Not just a job or a title, but a community. My team wasn't just coworkers, they were family. We celebrated birthdays, supported each other through breakups, health scares, career hurdles, and now all that was being reduced to a termination email from Dan Weaver, my direct supervisor, the same guy who had personally approved my time off just last week. Failure to maintain adequate presence, the email read. I guess grieving doesn't count as an acceptable absence anymore. I didn't cry. I didn't scream or throw anything. I just took out my phone and snapped a photo of the email, forwarded it to my personal account, then began shutting down my computer. I stood slowly, mechanically, and began packing up my things. By the time the first trickle of employees arrived, my desk was already half cleared. Tanya from accounting walked by, her steps slowing when she saw the cardboard box. "Holly, what's going on?" "I've been let go," I said, wrapping the small cactus my team gave me last Christmas in some newspaper. "What? Why?" she asked, stunned. Apparently, taking 3 days off for a funeral shows poor commitment to the company. Her jaw dropped. Are you serious? You need to talk to Paula. She's the regional manager. She would never... "I'm not going to fight it," I said, calm but firm, "but I'm not going to forget it either." More of my team started arriving. Jason was first, his usual upbeat energy vanishing the moment he saw my box. "This is a joke, right?" he asked. "No joke. But we just nailed the Newbrook merger. Your planning is the reason we're 18% up this quarter." Apparently, that wasn't enough, I said with a sad smile. By 9:30, all 7 of my direct reports were standing around my desk. No one was working. No one was talking. Just stunned silence and barely contained anger. Ethan, our stoic logistics guru, looked like he was about to punch a hole in the drywall. Veronica was crying. And behind them stood Michael, Louise, Diane, Gabriella, and Kayla, all trying to process what had just happened. "You can't leave," Veronica said through tears. "The Wilson renewal is next week. We're negotiating the Hernandez contract. You're the only one who understands the systems inside and out." I sealed up the last box and stood. Dan should have thought about that before firing me for going to my father's funeral. Silence, heavy, uncomfortable, real. Then, as if on cue, we heard the unmistakable voice of Dan Weaver behind us. "I need everyone back at their desks," he said sharply, arms crossed. No one moved. Now, eventually, reluctantly, they drifted away, each casting a look back at me as they went. Dan stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You should have waited until the end of the day to pack. This could have been handled more discreetly." I stared him down. "Like the discretion you showed firing me over email after approving my leave?" His jaw clenched. "Business needs evolve quickly, Holly. We need people who understand priorities shift." "My father died, Dan," I said quietly. "Be careful how you finish that sentence." Something in his expression wavered. A flicker of doubt? Maybe. But then he straightened, adjusting his tie like a shield. HR is expecting you." "Don't worry," I said, picking up my box. "I won't make a scene, but you'll remember this moment. That I promise." The HR office was sterile, pale walls, a small clock ticking too loudly. Barbara Kent, the relatively new HR rep, offered me a sympathetic smile as I sat across from her. "I'm really sorry about this, Holly, and about your father." "Thanks," I replied, scanning the stack of documents she slid over. 2 weeks severance, non-disparagement clause, standard non-compete reminder, no working with direct competitors for 6 months. Right. Barbara hesitated. "Do you understand why this happened? I mean, this feels sudden." I pulled out my phone and showed her the email. 3 days of approved bereavement leave, and they fired me for not prioritizing work. Her eyes widened. She read the email carefully, her professional facade cracking for just a second. "There's no warning, no PIP, no documented performance concerns?" "Nope." She scribbled something on her legal pad, then said, "Give me a minute. I need to talk to legal." While she stepped out, I looked out the window at the Boise River glinting in the sun. My dad loved that river. We used to fish there for hours, standing in silence just listening to the current. "The river moves, Holly girl," he used to say, "but the rocks stay steady." 20 minutes later, Barbara returned with a tight, unreadable expression. "Unfortunately, Idaho is an at-will employment state," she began, choosing her words carefully. "The company is within its legal rights to—" "I understand," I said, cutting her off gently. I signed the paperwork. She looked at me for a moment, then lowered her voice. "Off the record, this isn't right. If you ever wanted to take action—" "I don't," I said, "but thank you." As I walked through the office one last time, I could feel the weight of every stare, every unsaid word. My team stood quietly as I passed, giving me nods of solidarity. I smiled at them. My final act as their leader. Outside, the September air was unseasonably warm. I loaded the box into my trunk and sat in the driver's seat for a moment. My phone buzzed with messages. "Jason, this is wrong. What can we do?" "Veronica, are you okay? Can we meet?" "Ethan, Dan's a coward." We're all furious. They just kept coming, support, outrage, loyalty. These people weren't just colleagues. They were my family, and I was going to protect them, even if it meant walking away from everything I had built. I started my car, a plan already taking shape. My phone rang just as I was pulling into my driveway. The caller ID read, Hank Fleming, the CEO of Vertex Transport Systems. We'd met a year ago at an industry conference, hit it off over shared gripes about outdated logistics platforms. He'd tried to poach me twice since then, but I wasn't ready to leave Summit Edge. Not until now. I answered, "Hank." "I was hoping you'd call," he said without missing a beat, "but I didn't expect the call to come with this much baggage." "So you've heard. News travels fast. One of your team already messaged me, said what happened was total BS. "That sounds like Jason," I said with a tired laugh. "It was. We talked. I filled him in on everything. The email, the lack of warning, the tone-deaf response to my father's death. Hank didn't just listen, he was genuinely outraged. "That's not leadership," he said flatly. "That's cowardice hiding behind policy." Then came the offer. "I'm going to be direct, Holly. We're expanding in the Pacific Northwest. We need someone like you, someone who can build teams, who understands operations, and who actually gives a damn about people. The division director role is yours if you want it." I sat in stunned silence for a moment. It was a big step up, more pay, more responsibility, and more autonomy, but there was still the non-compete. "What about my contract?" I asked. 6 months. Can't work for direct competitors in a 300-mile radius." Our legal teams looked at it. "It's vague, overly broad, and probably unenforceable. We'll cover legal fees if Summit Edge wants to push back." I nodded slowly. "I need to think about it." "Of course. Take the weekend. Call me Monday." That evening, I met up with Jason and Veronica at Riverfront Brewing, a tucked-away place where the beer's cold, the music's loud enough to avoid eavesdropping, and we were unlikely to run into any Summit Edge folks. They looked tired but energized in that righteous anger kind of way. How are you doing? Veronica asked as soon as we sat down. I'm okay, I said, meaning it. It's been a hell of a week, but I'll land on my feet. Jason snorted. Dan's already unraveling. The office is a mess. Nobody knows where your Henderson proposal files are, and your system access? Still not reassigned. Total chaos. I sipped my water. Sounds like a Dan problem. Veronica leaned in, lowering her voice. It's more than that. People are angry, not just our team, everyone. You were respected, Holly. The way they tossed you out, it scared people. I hadn't expected that. Honestly, I thought people would just move on. Paula's asking questions, Jason added. She just got back from that Seattle conference and had no idea any of this happened. Good, I thought. Let her clean up Dan's mess. My phone buzzed again. More messages from the team. Louise, Gabriella, Diane, each with updates, venting, solidarity. Apparently Dan had called for a rare emergency Saturday meeting. Wilson account review is due Monday, Veronica explained. They can't find your analysis files. I smiled to myself. Those files were stored properly, of course, but my personal system of categorization, not exactly plug and play. I should get going, I said, standing. Early appointment tomorrow. Jason caught my eye. Holly, if you did go to Vertex, just hypothetically, would they be hiring? I looked between him and Veronica. Their faces were earnest, hopeful. Hypothetically? Yes, they're hiring, and they're growing fast. The look they exchanged said everything. They were in. Saturday morning, I met with an employment attorney named Vincent Torres. His office was small, elegant, and filled with awards for wrongful termination cases. A mutual friend had put me in touch. After hearing my story and reading the email, he took off his glasses and looked at me. This is textbook wrongful termination. I'm not interested in suing, I said. I just want to understand if that non-compete will really hold up. Vincent reviewed it word for word. It's overreaching. A 300-mile restriction? That's excessive, especially considering they fired you after you took approved leave. Most judges would toss this out, especially in Idaho. So it's safe to take the job? Legally, it's a gray area. But Summit Edge would have to prove you're causing them direct harm. And given that they terminated you, their case is weak at best. I'd say proceed, but with caution. I left his office feeling lighter, empowered. I wasn't powerless in this. I had options. And more importantly, I had leverage. Over the weekend, my phone buzzed constantly. The emergency Saturday meeting had gone sideways. Dan tried to assign my responsibilities to 3 different people without giving them any extra time or compensation. The team was drowning. The Wilson account was threatening to walk. By Sunday night, I was done thinking. I picked up the phone and called Hank. I'm in, I told him, but I have one condition. Name it. If any of my former team applies to Vertex, I want them to be given real consideration. No red tape. Absolutely, he said without hesitation. If they're anything like you, we'd be lucky to have them. That afternoon, I signed my contract, Division Director, Pacific Northwest Operations. The pay was 40% higher, the benefits were better, and the sign-on bonus? Let's just say it was generous. I sat in my new office, still half empty, and exhaled for the first time in days. Then my phone buzzed. 7 messages, one from each core member of my old team. They all wanted to meet for coffee, privately. Tuesday morning, I sat at a local cafe downtown. Jason arrived first, then Veronica. Then one by one, the rest of the team trickled in. Ethan, Louise, Diane, Gabriella, and Kayla. We had to push 2 tables together to fit everyone. Summit Edge is falling apart, Ethan said. Dan's in full panic mode. Paula's asking a ton of questions, and clients, they're noticing. The Wilson account wants to know why you're not handling their renewal, Veronica added. I sipped my coffee, listening, processing, absorbing it all. Jason finally broke the tension. We heard you accepted the Vertex offer. I nodded. I did. We want to come with you, Veronica said, her voice steady. The others nodded in agreement. I looked at them. Really looked. These weren't just co-workers. They were warriors, survivors, people who had thrived under leadership that valued them. You all have jobs, I said. Good ones. Are you sure you want to risk that? What jobs? Louise scoffed. If they'd fire you for going to your father's funeral, none of us are safe. I paused. Vertex is hiring. I can refer you, but I can't make any promises. Gabriella smiled and pulled out a sheet of paper. We already applied. Yesterday. All 7 of us. I blinked. You applied before even talking to me? We trust you, Kayla said simply. Where you go, we go. A wave of emotion hit me. Gratitude, pride, maybe even a little awe. We were no longer just employees navigating a toxic system. We were a movement, and we were just getting started. The following Monday, my phone rang at exactly 7:30 a.m. The caller ID read Paula McCormick, the regional manager at Summit Edge. I stared at the screen for a second, then picked up. Good morning, Paula, I said calmly. Holly, she began, her voice strained but polite. We need to talk. Sure, I said. What's on your mind? I've just received 7 resignation letters, all from your former team, all effective immediately. There was a long pause. Care to explain? I'm not sure what explanation you're looking for, I said evenly. I don't work for Summit Edge anymore. They're going to Vertex, she snapped, where you just started as division director. That's not a coincidence. People make career decisions for lots of reasons, Paula, I replied. Maybe ask Dan why your top performing team all left at once. There was a longer pause this time. I could hear the weight of everything pressing down on her through the silence. This is about your termination, isn't it? Her tone had softened. I've reviewed the situation. Dan never consulted me before letting you go. I would never have approved that decision. Then maybe ask yourself why Summit Edge's regional manager wasn't involved in firing one of her own division leads. She sighed. Dan said it was a performance issue that couldn't wait. I was at the Seattle conference and I trusted his judgment. Clearly that was a mistake. I said nothing. The silence stretched. Look, she finally said, desperation seeping into her voice. I'm prepared to offer you your old position back. 10% raise. A formal apology. We need you, Holly. I didn't hesitate. I appreciate the offer, Paula, but I've already accepted another position. We'll match their salary, plus 15%. It's not about the money. Then what would it take? She asked, the calm in her voice cracking. The Wilson account is threatening to leave. 7 key people walked out. This is devastating. I exhaled slowly. It would take time travel, Paula. Back to when my father died and Summit Edge chose to punish me for grieving instead of showing even a shred of humanity. The line went quiet again. I need to go, I said gently. It's my first official day. I don't want to be late. Your non-compete, she started. Feel free to have your legal team contact mine, I replied, though they may want to review the details of my termination first. And with that, I ended the call. By 8:45, I was back at Vertex, walking through the glass doors of my new office, feeling like the sun had finally come out after a long storm. Hank greeted me in the lobby with a smile. Big day. Looks like it, I said, smiling back. We're reviewing all 7 of your referrals. I've looked at their resumes myself. They're impressive. They are, I said, and loyal. Summit Edge lost more than a team. They lost a foundation. Hank nodded. Their interviews start Wednesday. We'll give them a fair shot. Fair shot? I repeated with a laugh. They'll crush it. 2 days later, I got a call I hadn't expected. Barbara Kent, Summit Edge's HR rep. I probably shouldn't be telling you this, she said quietly, but Dan's been placed on administrative leave pending an internal review. I raised an eyebrow. Really? Paula launched an investigation into all recent terminations, especially those related to bereavement and leave policies. The board's involved now. Losing your team to a direct competitor was a wake-up call. That's good to hear, I said sincerely. They're also reviewing all terminations from the past year. Apparently, yours wasn't the only one handled poorly. Sounds like Summit Edge is finally doing some soul-searching. Barbara hesitated, then added, Off the record. People there miss you. You made a bigger impact than you know. By Friday afternoon, all 7 of my former team members had received and accepted offers from Vertex. That night, we met for dinner to celebrate. To new beginnings. Veronica toasted, lifting her glass. And to Holly, Jason added, who showed us what real leadership looks like. We clinked glasses, laughed, and celebrated more than just new jobs. We were celebrating freedom, respect, and a second chance at building something better. The following week, Summit Edge formally acknowledged my wrongful termination. Their legal department offered a settlement, money, of course, but more importantly, a written admission that what had happened to me was wrong. I accepted, not for the check, but for the record, for the acknowledgement, for every person who had ever been discarded by a company that claimed to value them. And just like that, Summit Edge lost another client. The Wilson account, unhappy with how things had been handled, decided to follow their team to Vertex. Their renewal paperwork arrived signed and sealed, under my direction now. The river had moved, but we had stayed steady. Just like my father had always taught me. 3 months later, I stood at the front of Vertex's largest conference room, presenting our quarterly results to the executive team. The numbers spoke for themselves. 30% growth in the Pacific Northwest Division. 4 new client acquisitions, including 3 former Summit Edge accounts. Operational cost reductions of over 20%. Hank leaned back in his chair, nodding slowly. Exceptional work, Holly. You and your team have exceeded every expectation. I smiled. They deserve the credit. I just gave them the space to thrive. After the meeting, I returned to my office to find all 7 of my core team waiting for me. They were huddled around a cake. "What's this?" I asked, amused. Jason grinned. "It's been exactly 3 months since we jumped ship together. We're calling it Independence Day," Kayla added with a laugh. I couldn't stop smiling. "You're all ridiculous." "But happy," Veronica said. "Really, truly happy." And they were. We all were. Here at Vertex, they had room to grow, real opportunities, real recognition, and above all, respect. That afternoon, I got a news alert on my phone. Summit Edge Logistics announces corporate restructuring amid client losses. I held up the screen. "Looks like we're making headlines." Ethan nodded. "They lost the Hernandez contract last week. That's 20% of their Northwest revenue. Dan's gone," Louise added. "Cleared out his office last Friday." Paula was trying to hold the company together, but honestly, it was too late. I didn't feel smug. I didn't feel vindictive. Just resolved. This wasn't revenge. It was justice. They had created a culture where grief was weakness, where people were tools, not humans. And that culture had failed. "To Summit Edge," I said, raising my glass of water. "May they learn the value of their people before it's too late." "To Holly," Gabriella added, who reminded us we deserve better. 6 months into my new role at Vertex, I received a lunch invitation that stopped me in my tracks. Paula McCormack. She was no longer with Summit Edge. The message said she'd joined a management consulting firm that specialized in organizational culture. Her note was simple. "Would like to talk if you're open to it." I agreed, out of curiosity, out of closure. We met at a quiet little restaurant overlooking the Boise River, appropriate considering how central that river had become to my story. When she arrived, Paula looked different, softer somehow. The stress that had always seemed to hang around her like smoke was gone. "Thank you for agreeing to meet," she said, sitting across from me. "You're welcome," I replied, waiting. I wanted to apologize properly for everything. What happened to you? It was wrong. I should have been involved, and I wasn't. That's on me. "You weren't directly responsible," I said calmly. "No," she agreed, "but I was part of the environment that made it possible. And when you left, when all of you left, it forced a reckoning." She looked out at the river for a long moment before continuing. "After you and your team resigned, we brought in outside consultants to assess the damage. The report was brutal. Culture, management practices, HR policies. It was all exposed." I stayed quiet. There was nothing I needed to add. "Summit Edge is being acquired," she said finally. "Meridian Shipping, at a fraction of what the company was worth a year ago. They're mostly buying the client list and real estate." That didn't surprise me. Clients had been leaving in waves. The talent pipeline had dried up. And Dan? I asked. Still unemployed last I heard. Word's gotten around. Your story. It's made the rounds in the industry. I hadn't gone out of my way to share what happened, but I hadn't stayed silent either. When people asked why I left Summit Edge, I told them the truth. Just the truth. Paula leaned forward. Can I ask you something? Sure. Was it worth it? Walking away the way you did? Not fighting, not raising hell, just leaving quietly? I thought about that for a moment. I thought about my team, now thriving in their new roles, about the clients who followed us because they trusted us more than they trusted the brand we'd left behind. I thought about the email that had set everything in motion and the man who used business needs as a shield for his lack of empathy. Yes, I said simply, it was worth it. The results speak for themselves. 1 year to the day after my termination, I received a letter from Vertex's executive board. I was being promoted, Executive Vice President of Operations, Northwest Region. My division had become the company's crown jewel. Most profitable, most efficient, highest employee satisfaction scores in the entire organization. And my team? Every single one of them had been promoted. Jason now led his own division. Veronica had transformed how we handled client relationships and was gaining recognition industry-wide. Ethan streamlined our logistics systems so efficiently, our KPIs had become the model for other regions. They'd all stepped into their potential and been seen. And me? I had built something better. Not just a team, not just numbers or charts or new revenue. I had built a culture where people mattered. On the anniversary of my firing, a small package arrived at my office. Inside was my cactus, slightly bigger now, still healthy, and a handwritten note from Barbara Kent. Rescued this from your desk. Thought you might want it back. Summit Edge closes for good next week. I placed the cactus on the windowsill. It had survived being neglected and discarded, and so had I. Now both of us were thriving in the light. That evening I drove out to the river, our river, the one my dad loved. I found the spot we used to fish, the one with the flat rock where he'd sit for hours, watching the current. The water still rushed by, as steady and relentless as ever. You were right, Dad, I whispered. Sometimes you just have to stay steady and let the current do its work. I stood there a while longer, watching the river carry away sticks, leaves, little debris, things that didn't belong in the water anymore. Summit Edge had been swept away too, by its own decisions, its own failures to value people. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need lawsuits or headlines or takedowns. My revenge was success. My revenge was a team that still believed in me. My revenge was building something that made the old system irrelevant. And that was enough. Because in the end, it's not just about what you leave behind, it's about what you create moving forward. So if you're ever in that moment staring at a cold email or a closed door or someone telling you that your humanity is a liability, remember this: you are not disposable. You are not just a number on a report, and when the river rushes hard and fast, you don't have to chase it. Be the rock. Let the current pass and build something better when the water clears. That's where the real power is. That's where your story begins.